The dimly lit corridors of the alien spacecraft stretched endlessly, their metallic walls humming faintly with the energy that powered the massive vessel. Cadet Laura Evans trudged along one of these corridors, her boots clicking softly against the cold floor. She kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with the other beings she passed, humans and aliens alike. Her face burned with embarrassment as she replayed the events of earlier in her mind. It had been a simple training exercise, nothing out of the ordinary. Yet somehow it had gone horribly wrong. Laura was part of an intergalactic exchange program, one of the few humans chosen to train alongside the Veilans, a species known for their strict discipline and advanced technology. The program was supposed to foster understanding between humans and extraterrestrials, but so far, all Laura felt was overwhelmed. Everything about the Veilans, their towering height, their shimmering silver skin, their unblinking gaze, made her feel small and insignificant. Still, she had worked hard to earn her place here, or at least she thought she had. Earlier that day, during a routine simulation designed to test coordination and problem-solving skills, Laura had made a mistake. A big one. She had misread a control panel, triggering a security alert that locked down half the ship. Alarms blared, lights flashed, and chaos erupted as everyone scrambled to figure out what had happened. By the time the situation was resolved, Captain Ryan Foster, the human officer overseeing the program, looked ready to explode. His face turned red as he barked orders to calm everyone down, while the Veilan overseers stood silently, their glowing eyes fixed on Laura. When the dust settled, Laura found herself standing before the Veilan Council, a group of 3 imposing figures seated on elevated platforms. Their voices were deep and resonant, each word delivered with calculated precision. They explained to her, in no uncertain terms, that mistakes were not tolerated aboard their ship. Humans were guests here, they reminded her, and guests were expected to follow rules without question. Laura wanted to explain herself, to tell them it was just an accident, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she nodded numbly as they handed down her punishment. Disciplinary detail. Disciplinary detail meant cleaning and maintenance work in the lower decks of the ship, far away from the main operations. It was a job reserved for those who had failed in some way, whether through incompetence or disobedience. Laura knew this assignment was meant to humiliate her, to remind her of her place. But as she walked toward the designated area, she couldn't help feeling more frustrated than ashamed. She hadn't meant to cause trouble. Why couldn't they see that? When she arrived at the lower decks, she was greeted by a motley crew of individuals from different species. There was Jake Miller, a human soldier with a permanent scowl etched onto his face. He leaned casually against a wall, arms crossed, watching her approach with obvious disdain. "Another one bites the dust," he muttered under his breath. Beside him stood Maria Lopez, a petite woman with dark hair tied back into a tight bun. Unlike Jake, she offered Laura a small, sympathetic smile. "Don't take it personally," she said quietly. "We've all been there." Laura didn't respond. She wasn't sure what to say. Instead, she focused on the task ahead. The Veilans had assigned them to clean and repair various sections of the ship's infrastructure, a tedious job that required crawling through narrow passages and handling delicate equipment. As the group got to work, Laura noticed how disjointed they seemed. No one communicated unless absolutely necessary, and even then, their interactions were terse and impersonal. It was clear that morale was low. Korak, the alien in charge of Muro, the group, didn't help matters. He was a hulking creature with thick armored skin and sharp claws that clicked ominously whenever he moved. His voice was gruff and commanding, often laced with insults aimed at anyone who dared make a mistake. When Jake accidentally dropped a tool, Korak roared in anger, calling him incompetent and threatening to report him to the higher-ups. Laura flinched at the sound of his voice, though she tried not to show it. She could see why the others avoided speaking up around him. Fear hung heavy in the air like a storm cloud. Despite the tension, Laura threw herself into the work. She figured if she couldn't change the circumstances, she might as well focus on doing her best. As she cleaned a section of conduit, she noticed something odd about the wiring inside. It looked old and frayed, almost as if it hadn't been properly maintained in years. Curious, she asked Korak about it. "Shouldn't we replace this?" she ventured cautiously. "It looks like it could short out any second." Korak turned to glare at her, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "You think you know better than me, human?" he growled. "Stick to your job and stop asking questions." Laura bit her lip and nodded, stepping back. She didn't want to push her luck, especially not with someone like Korak. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that ignoring the problem would only lead to bigger issues later. As the hours dragged on, Laura began to notice patterns in the way the group worked, or rather didn't work. Everyone operated in isolation, focusing solely on their own tasks without considering how they fit into the larger picture. Communication was virtually non-existent, and teamwork was practically non-existent. It was no wonder things felt so chaotic. Laura wondered if anyone else realized how inefficient their methods were. If they worked together instead of separately, they could probably finish their assignments twice as fast. Her thoughts were interrupted when Jake called out to her. "Hey, rookie," he said, tossing her a rag. "You missed a spot over there." Laura glanced at the spot he pointed to and frowned. It wasn't dirty, it was just a smudge left behind by someone else's careless cleaning. She opened her mouth to argue but decided against it. Arguing with Jake wouldn't get her anywhere. Instead, she simply wiped the spot and moved on. Later, during a brief break, Laura sat apart from the others, sipping water from a canteen. She watched as Korak paced back and forth, barking orders at anyone who dared slow down even slightly. The others obeyed without question, their movements mechanical and devoid of enthusiasm. Laura sighed, feeling a pang of sympathy for them. They weren't bad people, or beings for that matter. They were just trapped in a system that crushed any sense of initiative or creativity. Maria joined her a few minutes later, sitting cross-legged on the floor. "So," she said, breaking the silence. "What did you do to end up here?" Laura hesitated before answering. She didn't particularly want to relive her embarrassing moment, but Maria seemed genuinely curious. "I messed up during a training exercise," she admitted finally. "Triggered a security alert by accident." Maria chuckled softly. "Sounds like something that could happen to anyone," she said. "Don't let Korak get to you. He's like that with everyone." Laura nodded, grateful for the reassurance. For the first time since arriving, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe being stuck on disciplinary detail wasn't the end of the world after all. The next day started much like the previous one, with Laura and the rest of the group gathering in the lower decks to receive their assignments from Korak. The alien leader barked out orders without explanation, pointing claws at various sections of the ship that needed attention. Laura listened carefully, trying to piece together how everything connected. She noticed that Korak assigned tasks randomly, without considering each person's skills or strengths. Jake, who was clearly more comfortable handling tools than scrubbing floors, was sent to clean a storage bay, while Maria, an experienced technician, was tasked with organizing supplies instead of working on the ship's systems. As they dispersed to their respective areas, Laura found herself paired with Maria for a repair job deep in the bowels of the ship. The assignment involved fixing a malfunctioning energy conduit, a task that required precision and teamwork. Laura had studied similar systems during her training, so she felt confident enough to take the lead. Together they crawled through narrow passages until they reached the damaged section. The conduit was tucked behind a panel, its wires sparking faintly in the dim light. "This doesn't look good," Maria murmured, inspecting the damage. "If we don't fix it soon, it could overload and cause a power surge." Laura nodded, already thinking through possible solutions. She remembered reading about a technique that could stabilize the system temporarily, but it required rerouting some of the energy flow. It wasn't standard procedure, but given the situation, it seemed like their best option. "We can try this," Laura said, pulling out a small handheld device from her toolkit. "It'll redirect the excess energy away from the main line. That should buy us enough time to make permanent repairs later." Maria raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. Are you sure about this? If something goes wrong, we're going to have a bigger problem on our hands. I'm sure, Laura replied firmly. Trust me. After a moment's hesitation, Maria nodded and stepped back to let Laura work. Carefully, Laura adjusted the settings on the device and attached it to the conduit. She held her breath as she activated it, watching the readings closely. To her relief, the spark subsided and the system stabilized. A wave of satisfaction washed over her as she turned to Maria with a grin. See? Told you it would work. Maria smiled back, impressed despite herself. Not bad, rookie. Not bad at all. They finished securing the conduit and headed back to report their success to Korak. When they arrived, however, things quickly turned sour. Korak listened impatiently as Laura explained what they had done, his expression growing darker with every word. Before she could finish, he cut her off with a sharp growl. You think you know better than me? He snarled, looming over her menacingly. This is my team, human. You follow my orders, not the other way around. Laura opened her mouth to defend herself, but Maria stepped in before she could speak. With all due respect, sir, she said calmly. Laura's solution worked. The conduit is stable now. Maybe we should consider letting her share ideas if they help get the job done. Korak glared at Maria, his claws flexing angrily. For a moment, it seemed like he might lash out, but then he turned away with a dismissive snort. Do what you want, he muttered. Just don't come crying to me when your shortcuts fail. With that, he stalked off, leaving the group to continue their tasks. Despite Korak's hostility, word of Laura's ingenuity spread quickly among the others. By lunchtime, several members of the platoon approached her to ask about her methods. Even Jake, who had initially dismissed her as just another incompetent cadet, seemed curious. So you fixed the conduit, huh? He asked, leaning against a wall. How'd you pull that off? It wasn't anything special, Laura replied modestly. Just something I learned during training. Jake smirked, though there was a hint of admiration in his eyes. Well, whatever it was, it worked. Can't argue with results. Over the course of the afternoon, Laura shared her knowledge with anyone willing to listen. She explained basic principles of engineering and offered tips for improving efficiency. Slowly but surely, the group began to adopt her techniques and their productivity improved noticeably. Korak, however, grew increasingly agitated. He paced back and forth, his movements jerky and tense, as he watched the team work together seamlessly, under Laura's guidance. Gone were the days of disjointed effort and wasted time. Now everyone moved with purpose, communicating openly and supporting one another. It was clear that Laura's leadership style, encouraging collaboration rather than blind obedience, was resonating with the group. By evening, tensions between Laura and Korak reached a breaking point. As the group gathered to review their progress for the day, Korak stormed into the room, his voice booming like thunder. What is this nonsense? He demanded, gesturing wildly at the organized workspace. Who gave you permission to change the way we operate? Laura stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. No one gave us permission, she said evenly. We did it because it works. Look around you, Korak. The ship is running, smoother than ever, and morale is higher too. Isn't that what matters? Korak's eyes narrowed dangerously, and for a moment it seemed like he might attack her. But then something unexpected happened. One by one, the other members of the platoon began to speak up. She's right, Jake said, crossing his arms. Things are better since she took charge. Maria nodded in agreement. We've gotten more done in one day than we usually do in a week. You can't deny that. Even the quieter members chimed in, their voices filled with newfound confidence. Korak looked around at them, his expression shifting from anger to disbelief. For the first time, he seemed unsure of himself. Finally, with a low growl, he turned and stormed out of the room, leaving the group in stunned silence. After a few moments, cheers erupted from the platoon. People clapped Laura on the back, congratulating her for standing up to Korak. Jake grinned at her, shaking his head in amazement. Never thought I'd see the day someone put that brute in his place, he said. Good job, rookie. Laura smiled, though she couldn't shake the feeling that their victory might be short-lived. Korak wouldn't take this lying down, and neither would the Valen Council. Still, for now, she allowed herself to bask in the moment. Against all odds, she had earned the trust and respect of a group of misfits who had once dismissed her as just another failure, and in doing so she had proven, to herself if no one else, that she was capable of far more than anyone had given her credit for. As the group settled down to plan their next steps, Laura felt a spark of determination ignite within her. This was only the beginning. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them head-on alongside her newfound team. The following morning brought an unexpected twist that would test Laura's newfound leadership and the cohesion of her team. Just as the group was settling into their routine, a loud alarm blared through the lower decks, shaking the walls and sending vibrations rippling underfoot. Everyone froze, unsure of what to do. The sound was different from the usual alerts. It was deeper, more urgent, and carried an unmistakable tone of danger. Laura felt her stomach drop as she realized something serious was happening. Power surge detected in Section Delta, a robotic voice announced over the intercom. All personnel evacuate immediately. Panic spread quickly among the platoon members. Some dropped their tools and started running toward the exits, while others hesitated, unsure whether they should leave or stay and try to help. Korak appeared moments later, his face twisted with fear and confusion. He shouted orders, but his voice cracked under pressure, making it hard for anyone to understand him. Laura stepped forward, her mind racing. She had studied emergency protocols during her training and knew that evacuating wasn't always the best option, not when lives depended on stabilizing critical systems. Ignoring Korak's frantic commands, she turned to the group. "We can't just run," she said firmly. "If we don't fix this now, the entire ship could be at risk." Jake frowned, looking torn between trusting Laura and following instinct. "You sure about this?" he asked. "What if it gets worse?" "It will get worse if we don't act," Laura replied without hesitation. "But we need to move fast." Her confidence seemed to steady the others. Maria nodded, stepping up beside her. "She's right. We have to stabilize the system before it overloads." With no time to waste, Laura quickly divided the group into teams based on their skills. Jake and two others were tasked with securing nearby corridors to prevent unauthorized access, while Maria and a few technicians worked alongside Laura to address the power surge directly. They grabbed their tools and rushed to Section Delta, where the source of the problem lay. The scene was chaotic. Sparks flew from exposed panels, and thick smoke filled the air, making it hard to breathe. Laura coughed as she approached the main control hub, her eyes scanning the readings displayed on the monitors. The numbers were climbing rapidly, indicating a catastrophic overload was imminent. She called out instructions to Maria and the others, directing them to reroute energy flows and shut down non-essential systems. Every second counted. Korak arrived shortly after, his movements frantic as he tried to take charge. "What are you doing?" he barked, pushing past Jake to confront Laura. "Stop interfering and let me handle this." Laura didn't back down. "You're not helping," she shot back, her voice sharp but controlled. "Your orders are making things worse. Let us finish this." For a moment, Korak looked like he might argue further, but then he faltered, his usual bravado crumbling under the weight of the crisis. His claws twitched nervously as he glanced at the chaos around him. Finally, with a low growl, he stepped aside, allowing Laura to continue leading the effort. Working together, the team managed to isolate the faulty conduit causing the surge. Laura guided Maria in recalibrating the system, her hands steady despite the tension in the air. Sweat dripped down her forehead as she focused on the task, ignoring the heat radiating from the damaged equipment. One wrong move could trigger an explosion, but she pushed those thoughts aside. There was no room for fear now. After several agonizing minutes, the readings finally stabilized. The alarm stopped blaring, and the hum of the ship's engines returned to its normal rhythm. Exhausted but triumphant, Laura let out a shaky breath and turned to face the group. "It's done," she said simply. We stopped it. Cheers erupted from the team, echoing through the smoky corridor. Even Korak, who had been standing silently in the background, offered a reluctant nod of acknowledgement. For the first time since Laura joined the disciplinary detail, the group felt truly united. Each member played a role in averting disaster, and they all knew it wouldn't have happened without her leadership. Word of the incident reached Captain Ryan Foster within minutes. He arrived shortly afterward, accompanied by a pair of Valen officers. Their glowing eyes scanned the area, taking in the damage and the weary faces of the platoon. Foster's expression was unreadable as he addressed the group. "Report," he demanded, his tone clipped and professional. Laura stepped forward, knowing it was her responsibility to explain what happened. She recounted the events clearly and concisely, emphasizing how teamwork and quick thinking had prevented a major catastrophe. As she spoke, she noticed Foster's demeanor shift slightly. His initial skepticism gave way to something resembling respect, though he masked it well. When she finished, one of the Valen officers stepped forward. "You took command during a crisis," he said, his deep voice reverberating through the space. "Why?" Laura met his gaze without flinching. "Because someone had to," she replied. "Korak wasn't able to lead effectively, and I knew we could solve the problem if we worked together. I wasn't trying to undermine authority. I was trying to save the ship." The officer studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Your actions will be reviewed," he said. Then, turning to Korak, he added, "And so will yours." Korak bristled but said nothing, his shame evident in the way he avoided meeting anyone's eyes. As the Valens departed, Foster lingered behind. He approached Laura, his arms crossed as he regarded her thoughtfully. "You've caused quite a stir," he said, his tone softer than before. Not many cadets would have the guts to stand up to a superior, especially one like Korak. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," Laura admitted. "I just wanted to help." Foster smirked faintly. "Well, you certainly did that. Keep it up, Evans. You might surprise yourself yet." With that, he turned and left, leaving Laura to process what had just happened. Around her, the platoon buzzed with excitement. Jake clapped her on the shoulder, grinning widely. "Never doubted you for a second, rookie," he teased. Maria smiled warmly, offering quiet praise. Even the quieter members of the group came forward to thank her, their gratitude genuine. Over the next few hours, Laura worked tirelessly to rebuild trust and strengthen the bonds within the team. She made a point of speaking with each member individually, asking about their strengths, weaknesses, and goals. By listening to their concerns and acknowledging their contributions, she earned even more of their loyalty. Together, they tackled smaller tasks with renewed energy, proving that their earlier success wasn't a fluke. By the end of the day, the atmosphere in the lower decks had transformed completely. Gone was the tension and resentment that once defined the group. In its place was a sense of camaraderie and shared purpose. Laura marveled at how far they'd come in such a short time. What started as a punishment detail had become an opportunity to prove themselves, not just to the Valens, but to each other. As night fell and the ship drifted silently through the void of space, Laura reflected on everything that had happened. She realized that leadership wasn't about titles or authority. It was about earning trust and inspiring others to do their best. And though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, she felt ready to face them alongside her team. The next morning, Laura woke up feeling a mix of pride and unease. The previous day's victory had brought her closer to the platoon than she ever thought possible, but it also drew unwanted attention from higher-ups. She knew the Valen Council wouldn't overlook what happened so easily. Their strict hierarchy meant that any challenge to authority, even one born out of necessity, was seen as a threat. Still, Laura couldn't bring herself to regret her actions. The ship was safe, her team trusted her, and for the first time in weeks, she felt like she belonged somewhere. As the group gathered in their usual workspace, Korak remained conspicuously absent. No one mentioned his name, but the tension in the air suggested they were all wondering the same thing. Had he been removed from his position? Or worse, reported to the Velan command. Laura pushed those thoughts aside and focused on keeping morale high. "Let's get started," she said, addressing the group with quiet confidence. "We've got a lot to do today." Jake raised an eyebrow, smirking slightly. "Guess you're officially in charge now, huh?" Laura shook her head firmly. "I'm not in charge of anything. We're a team, remember? That's how we work best." Her words seemed to resonate with the others, who nodded in agreement. They split into smaller groups and began tackling their assignments, moving with purpose and efficiency. Throughout the morning, Laura made sure to check in with each subgroup, offering guidance when needed and praising their efforts. She noticed how much smoother everything ran when everyone worked together instead of competing against one another. Even the quieter members of the team stepped up, contributing ideas and solutions that surprised even themselves. It was clear that Laura's leadership style, focused on collaboration and mutual respect, had sparked something within them. By midday, however, the fragile peace was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Ryan Foster and 2 Velan officers. The trio entered the workspace without warning, their presence immediately halting all activity. Foster's expression was unreadable, while the Velans carried their usual air of detached authority. One of them, taller and more imposing than the other, stepped forward and addressed the group. "Cadet Evans," he said, his deep voice echoing through the room. "You are summoned to appear before the council." Laura felt her stomach tighten. Summoned before the council? Those words alone carried enough weight to make anyone nervous. She glanced at Maria and Jake, who exchanged worried looks, then straightened her posture and nodded. "Understood," she replied calmly. "When do I need to be there?" "Now," the Velan officer responded curtly. Without waiting for further questions, he turned and gestured for her to follow. Laura hesitated only briefly before stepping away from the group. As she walked past her teammates, she caught snippets of whispered encouragement. "You'll be fine," Maria mouthed silently, while Jake gave her a thumbs up. Their support bolstered her resolve, though she couldn't shake the nagging fear of what awaited her. The journey to the council chamber felt endless. Laura followed the Velans through winding corridors, her footsteps echoing softly against the metallic floors. The ship's hum seemed louder here, almost oppressive, as if the walls themselves were watching her every move. When they finally reached the chamber, Laura found herself standing before 3 towering Velan figures seated on elevated platforms, their glowing eyes fixed on her, unblinking and piercing. Beside them stood Captain Foster, his arms crossed, as he observed the proceedings. "You have disrupted the chain of command aboard this vessel," one of the council members began, his voice low and resonant. "Explain yourself." Laura swallowed hard but kept her gaze steady. "I didn't set out to disrupt anything," she said carefully. "During the power surge, Korak wasn't able to provide effective leadership. If we had waited for him to act, the situation would have escalated. My priority was saving the ship and protecting everyone on board." The council members exchanged glances, their expressions inscrutable. Another spoke next. "Humans are guests here. You are expected to follow our rules without question. Do you understand this?" "I do," Laura replied. "But following rules isn't always the same as doing what's right. Sometimes you have to adapt. That's what I did. I adapted to the situation because it was necessary." Her answer seemed to intrigue them. The third council member leaned forward slightly, his claws clicking softly against the armrest of his platform. "And what makes you believe your methods are superior to ours?" Laura took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "They're not superior," she admitted. "They're just different. Your system works well when everything goes according to plan. But when things go wrong, and they will, you need flexibility. You need people who can think on their feet and work together. That's what my team did. And that's why we succeeded." The council fell silent, their glowing eyes studying her intently. For a moment, Laura wondered if she had said too much. Then, one of them nodded slowly. "Your reasoning is logical," he conceded. "However, defiance cannot go unpunished. There must be consequences for challenging authority. Before Laura could respond, Captain Foster stepped forward. With respect, he interjected, Cadet Evans has proven herself capable of handling responsibility. Perhaps instead of punishment, we should consider allowing her to continue leading her team. Under supervision, of course. The council members exchanged another glance, clearly deliberating. Finally, the tallest of them spoke. Very well. Cadet Evans, you will retain temporary oversight of your current assignment. However, know this. Failure will not be tolerated. Should you falter again, the consequences will be severe. Relief washed over Laura, though she kept her expression neutral. Thank you, she said simply. I won't let you down. With that, the council dismissed her, and Laura returned to the lower decks feeling both elated and cautious. Word of her meeting spread quickly among the platoon, and by the time she arrived, they greeted her with cheers and applause. Jake grinned broadly. Looks like you officially outrank us now, rookie. Laura shook her head, laughing despite herself. Not even close. I'm still just a cadet. But yeah, I guess I'm staying put for now. Over the next few hours, Laura focused on reinforcing the progress they'd made. She encouraged open communication, reminding everyone that their voices mattered. When someone suggested improving the layout of their tools to save time, Laura implemented the idea immediately. Small changes like these added up, making their work faster and more efficient. By evening, the entire area looked tidier and better, organized than it had in months. Korak eventually reappeared later that night, his demeanor subdued. He avoided looking directly at Laura or the others, instead focusing on completing his own tasks quietly. Though no apology was offered, his behavior signaled a shift. He no longer tried to assert dominance over the group. Laura decided not to press the issue. What mattered most was that the team functioned smoothly, and Korak's newfound humility helped rather than hindered their efforts. As the day drew to a close, Laura took a moment to reflect on how far they'd come. Just days ago, she had been an outsider, humiliated and isolated on disciplinary detail. Now she led a cohesive unit that operated with precision and teamwork. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges ahead, but they faced them together. Jake approached her as she sat alone near the edge of the workspace, staring out at the stars visible through a nearby viewport. Thinking about home? He asked, sitting beside her. Something like that, Laura admitted. It's strange, isn't it? Being so far away from Earth, working with aliens, sometimes it feels like I don't belong anywhere. Jake chuckled softly. Tell me about it. But hey, look at what you've done here. These guys trust you. Even the Valens seem impressed. Doesn't sound like someone who doesn't belong, to me. Laura smiled faintly, appreciating his words. Thanks, Jake. That means a lot. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars blur past as the ship traveled through space. Despite the uncertainty of the future, Laura felt a sense of hope. She had proven herself not just to the Valens or her superiors, but to herself. Whatever came next, she knew she could handle it. After all, she wasn't alone anymore. She had a team behind her, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The days that followed Laura's meeting with the Valen Council passed quickly, filled with hard work and growing camaraderie. The platoon had transformed under her leadership, becoming a tightly knit unit that operated with efficiency and purpose. Each member contributed their unique skills, and together they tackled even the most challenging tasks with confidence. Laura continued to lead by example, encouraging collaboration and fostering an environment where everyone felt valued. But, despite their progress, she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming, a reckoning of sorts. Her instincts proved correct when Captain Ryan Foster appeared one morning with news that sent ripples through the group. We're heading to a new location, he announced, his tone serious. A nearby planet has requested assistance from the Valens. They're facing resource shortages and need help stabilizing their infrastructure. Our ship will serve as part of the support fleet. Laura listened carefully, her mind racing with questions. What did this mean for her and the team? Would they be reassigned to different duties? Before she could ask, Foster turned to address her directly. Cadet Evans, you and your platoon have been selected to assist with ground operations. This is a chance to prove yourselves, not just to me, but to the Valons and the locals. Don't waste it. The announcement sparked a mix of excitement and anxiety among the group. Some were eager for the opportunity to step off the ship and test their abilities in a real-world scenario, while others worried about the challenges ahead. Laura understood both perspectives but chose to focus on preparation. We've trained for situations like this, she reminded them. Stick together, trust each other, and we'll get through it. The journey to the planet took several hours, during which Laura worked tirelessly to ensure everyone was ready. She reviewed protocols, checked equipment, and held briefings to clarify roles and responsibilities. Jake teased her about being overly thorough, but even he admitted it helped ease some of the tension. By the time they arrived, the platoon was as prepared as they could be. The planet itself was a stark contrast to the sterile confines of the ship. Its landscape was rugged and desolate, dotted with crumbling structures and dry riverbeds. The air carried a faint metallic tang, and the sky glowed orange from twin suns hanging low on the horizon. A small delegation of locals greeted them upon landing, humanoid beings with pale skin and wide, curious eyes. Their leader introduced herself as Commander Lyra and explained the situation in clipped tones. Resources were dwindling, and their primary power grid was failing. Without intervention, their settlement would collapse within weeks. Laura and her team were assigned to repair the damaged grid, a task that required venturing deep into unstable tunnels beneath the surface. It was dangerous work, but Laura knew they were up to the challenge. As they descended into the tunnels, she kept her focus sharp, scanning for hazards while guiding the group through the dimly lit passages. Maria led the technical side of the operation, her expertise invaluable as they identified weak points in the system. Jake and two others handled heavy lifting and structural reinforcement, ensuring the tunnels remained stable as they worked. Progress was slow but steady. The team encountered numerous obstacles, collapsed sections, faulty wiring, and unexpected surges, but Laura's calm demeanor kept everyone grounded. When frustration bubbled over, she reminded them why they were there: to help people who desperately needed it. Her words resonated, pushing them to push past their limits. On the third day of their mission, disaster struck. A sudden tremor shook the tunnels, sending debris raining down and trapping half the team behind a wall of rubble. Panic threatened to take hold, but Laura acted swiftly. "Stay calm," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Maria, assess the damage. Jake, gather tools. We need to clear this fast. Everyone else, stay alert for aftershocks." Working together, they managed to free their trapped teammates without further injury. The experience left them shaken, but more determined than ever to complete the job. Laura pulled the group aside for a moment, her expression softening. "I know this isn't easy," she said quietly, "but look at what we've accomplished so far. We've faced setbacks, but we haven't given up. That's what makes us strong. Let's finish this and make sure no one gets hurt again." By the end of the week, the power grid was fully operational, and the settlement began to show signs of recovery. Lights flickered back on in homes, water flowed through pipes, and hope returned to the faces of the locals. Commander Lyra personally thanked Laura and her team, her gratitude evident in every word. "You've done more than fix our systems," she said. "You've reminded us that we're not alone. Thank you." Back aboard the ship, the platoon received a hero's welcome, or as close to one as the stoic Valens would allow. Captain Foster offered rare praise, acknowledging Laura's leadership and the team's resilience. Even Korak, who had mostly kept to himself since the power surge incident, gave a grudging nod of approval. For the first time, Laura felt truly accepted, not just as a cadet or a human, but as someone who had earned their trust and respect. The Valan Council called another meeting, this time with a markedly different tone. One of the members addressed Laura directly. "Your actions on the planet demonstrated qualities we value: adaptability, determination, and cooperation. While humans are still learning to integrate into our systems, you have shown that such integration is possible and beneficial. Consider this a formal recognition of your efforts. Though the acknowledgement was subtle, it carried significant weight. Laura bowed slightly, offering a respectful nod. "Thank you," she said simply. "I couldn't have done it without my team." As the meeting concluded, Captain Foster approached her with a small smile. "Looks like you've made quite the impression, Evans. Keep this up, and you might find yourself rising through the ranks faster than you think." Laura smiled back, though her thoughts were already drifting to the future. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she felt ready to face whatever challenges came her way. More importantly, she knew she wasn't alone. Whether aboard the ship, on distant planets, or anywhere else her journey took her, she had a team she could count on, and who could count on her. That night, as the ship drifted silently through space, Laura stood by a viewport gazing out at the endless expanse of stars. Behind her, the faint hum of laughter and conversation echoed from the lower decks, a reminder of how far they'd come. She thought about Earth, about the life she'd left behind, and realized she didn't miss it as much anymore. Here, among these misfits and dreamers, she had found a new home. Jake joined her after a while, leaning casually against the frame of the viewport. "Thinking about running away yet?" he joked, though his tone was light. "Not a chance," Laura replied, smiling. "This is where I belong." They stood there together, watching the universe unfold before them, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they'd face it side by side.